Hello and happy Friday, and thanks for tuning in to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org. In this show in particular, correct me if I'm Norm, I'm your host, Norm. I'm thrilled to be here with Sarah Rosie Rosenthal, who I know because of your work with CultureConnect.
Correct.
Which is, you're a newish president, I guess, of CultureConnect. And you're doing a great job. I'm also on the board for full disclosure.
Yeah, full disclosure.
Yeah.
My vice president, in fact.
You're a vice president. I want a card that says that. Rosie's vice president. So you don't have a Facebook page.
I do not.
I research most of the guests, and you give, as I mentioned just now, kind of crappy Google.
Yeah, that's a specific effort. Sorry. I mean, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. But when you type into Google, Sarah Rosie Rosenthal, here's the first thing that comes up. There's a movie called Aliens versus Predator. Are you aware of this?
Yeah.
And the Aliens versus Predator wiki lists a character, Private Sarah Rosie Rosenthal, who's part of Sergeant Lopez's security team aboard the spacecraft USCSS Covenant. Later on, she was killed by the adult neomorph that infiltrated David's temple. My question, is that you?
Yes.
It is. Wow.
That one I couldn't hide because it's so public,
It's so weird because it came up right away. I'm like, oh, good. Stuff's coming up. I don't
had
need Facebook.
no idea, Norm.
Yeah, you didn't? Well,
No.
You should look that up. Sarah Rosie Rosenthal, all the same spelling and everything, but you look totally different.
Yeah. Like an alien.
And then I Googled, well, who wins the fight between Alien and Predator? Turns out, spoiler alert, it was a tie.
A tie?
Yeah, it was a tie.
That's ridiculous.
So you, how long have you lived in Rhinebeck?
I've lived in Rhinebeck coming up on 7 years.
And you moved here from where?
Austin, Texas.
How come?
Why did we move here? Morgan and I, my husband, Morgan, and I were tired of being hot, like it is in this little studio right now.
Yeah.
Reminding me of my days in Texas.
Well, I'm not turning off the bright lights shining in your face.
No. So yeah, it was, I think in some ways it was, I didn't really realize this till after, but it was really a climate move. I mean, I knew that I was hot, but it was also just like the way that the heat was working in Texas was it just kept getting hotter and hotter and killing things.
Yeah.
Things were dying. So it's not like winter here, things go dormant. It's rough, but then it comes back to life. It was brutal.
Just dying.
Yeah, and it's not, you're not really meant to, Texas is largely a desert. There's some natural water in Austin, but it just didn't feel like it was meant for humans to. I wanted to move somewhere where it felt like humans were meant to live. There's water.
This is what I say about
seasons.
California all the time.
Yeah.
I love California. I always imagine I would end up living in LA, but nature over and over says, no, you should not be living here.
That's how I felt about Texas.
There's tsunamis and mudslides and droughts and just everything.
Yeah.
So now you're here in the Hudson Valley, which, honest to God, I think this all the time. Like, wow, humans are meant to live right here.
Yes.
It's a perfect
Food
place.
grows.
Yeah.
You don't have to make massive, insane efforts. There was a point in Texas, this was not when we decided to move, but we had a big backyard, we had a big lot. We had a big backyard, and I called in somebody to look at the yard and say what could you grow here, because it was really dust and cactus. And the gardener sort of said, I wouldn't. He was just
Gravel.
he was just like, it's not worth it. Save the water for people who are actually growing food on farms. There's no point in you irrigating the way you would have to irrigate.
Right.
I mean, it was his business to plant things and make people pay for it, and he said, just don't bother. So.
Wow. And so now when people are moving here, right here, Rhinebeck and Hudson Valley in general, in droves, and it seems like a lot of them have that same reason, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because it makes you think, maybe people are taking climate change
Yes.
more seriously
Yes.
than we suspect.
Yeah, and it wasn't super intentional, but ultimately I'm like, I guess it was a little bit of a climate, move. I want to be based somewhere that's sustainable.
Yeah. And how did you find your way here?
That was we a little bit just put a finger down on the map, not entirely. We had a lot of friends who went to Bard, and so knew of the area, knew of Bard, and they were all kind of creative, weird artist people. we decided we wanted to be within some sort of distance of New York City, that we wanted to be rural, but that it would feel nice to be able to get to the city easily.
Right.
So then it just, leaving Austin, like we had a very vibrant and queer artist community in Austin. So we were a little nervous about moving somewhere and just it being too norm. Oh, didn't mean you.
Well,
just
good.
normal.
You.
That's not your full name, normal.
No, not yet.
So it felt comforting to think about Bard as a place where maybe there was some freaky people.
I love that. And did you know people from Bard who were actually living here? When
Not really.
you just they were like, oh, you're coming east, you should check out Rhinebeck, or
You mean the Bard people?
Yeah.
I think it was as we were like, where would we sort of want to be? And then Morgan was like, oh, well, we know all these great people from Bard, so let's go check out Rhinebeck and Red Hook and see what that area is like because it's close enough.
Yeah. And so how did you choose Rhinebeck, not Red Hook? I assume you looked at the schools. And
We
their
did look at
school
the
reports and all that.
schools. I mean, I have lots of feelings about that whole process that we went through, but it ended up just being the house that we found. Like we were looking at equally at Rhinebeck and Red Hook, and then we just found our house, and that was in Rhinebeck.
There you go. And what year was that?
I think we bought the house in 2014.
And how old were the kids?
So Robin was 4, Archer was 7.
Okay.
But then we worked on the house for a year while we lived in Austin.
Oh.
And one
nice.
of us was flying up every 6 weeks or so. And
So the kids
checking
were
on it.
5 and 8 when they started
Yeah,
school?
mhm,
When
kindergarten and
they
second.
Matriculated.
When they matriculated into
Yeah.
Chancellor Livingston Elementary.
Yeah, well, they're not going to leave that book in the library, the one about matriculation.
Or the one about Chancellor Livingston.
No, for that one. So you knew nobody.
We knew, there was one, I mean, it's just such a random connection, but shout out to Carrie Zeff over at Starry Bird Kids. She knew Morgan's sister from, 100 years ago, like when they were teenagers, they worked at Omega together or something for the summer. So Carrie was the one person that we had to kind of like show up in town and be like, where should we
Yeah.
eat? I don't know.
Right.
That was it.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so what was the process like of sort of fitting into this society?
Yeah, that's an interesting
community.
question. So let's see, we moved up in 2015, so the kids started that school year. For me, I think I was trying to just find people to connect to through the kids, largely, like just kids want to have play dates, so seeing if anything kind of worked with parents. Morgan has a pretty strong philosophy that having kids the same age as some other person is not a binding enough interest to make friends.
It's not, but boy, it works out that way a bunch.
It can, and it's real nice if your kids like each other and then you like each other. But he was
yeah.
sort of like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not barking up the Chancellor Livingston tree. So he started poking around over in Kingston, and Morgan does like creative development. So like buys buildings, fixes them up, tries to find local people who are wanting to start businesses to get in there and do their thing.
And so you moved up, and he started poking around Kingston, looking for something to creatively develop.
Yes, because he did not see that opportunity in Rhinebeck. The real estate's so expensive, the kind of vibe of the town already pretty established versus Kingston
Right.
in 2015 especially, just still pretty like, well, you could do something.
Yeah.
So Morgan kind of started connecting over there, and then I would say over here the traction was the Trump's election, and I basically went to school that next day looking around to see who
was smiling and who was moping.
was in a state of utter shock and horror. And then, I found Elena from over at Land of Oz Toys. The two of us grabbed each other in solidarity. And then we sort of at Morgan's suggestion, sort of made a group of people that we loosely knew a little bit to try to do some political organizing, motivated by the election. We sort of were like, hey, we know you a little bit, we know you a little bit, we know you a little bit. What can we all do together
Right.
as a community, because we need community?
And what were I love the idea of you going to like CLS and like pick up or drop off and sort of like scoping the parents like, oh, that one's crying.
Yes.
That one's been crying. This one looks really mad.
Yes.
And those people look super happy. So you organized, and what kinds of things did you organize to do?
So we created a little group called HERS, Hudson Valley Empowerment and Research Society. I think that's what we were. And
catchy name.
Yeah, pretty good. And let's see what all did. I mean, the big project we ended up doing was Vanessa Bertozzi, who you should certainly have in here if you have not already, village
she
trustee.
Came in, she spoke to Allison here, but I threatened to invite her back.
Yeah.
She said maybe.
You and Allison try not to. Well, give
Not
some
really.
space. Give some space in between
yeah.
the same guests.
Yeah, at least a week.
So Vanessa and I, largely with the support of the entire group, but organized. We went to a civics class that Zephyr teach out, and a couple of legislators over in, I think Matt Stinchcombe was also involved in organizing that from Good Work Institute. They organized like a series of civics classes, and Vanessa and I basically were like, we want to repeat that in Rhinebeck. So we put on a series of 4 civics classes at Star Library in Rhinebeck.
Wow. You and Vanessa leading the classes with
No.
help from Zephyr and...
We didn't have. We just asked Zephyr and Matt for some like guidance on how they structured it, but we recruited people to come in and lead the classes. So we had I can't think of his name right now.
Sounds kind of awesome.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was super fun. We had activists, but we had so I'm trying to think. He's not Molinaro, but somebody else like a couple steps down from Molinaro came in just to talk about like how the structure of county and city and village and town government all works, how they intersect with each other. We tried to make it nonpartisan. I mean, and just recruit. And we had pretty good show up at it.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work. It was super fun.
Oh, that must have been great.
Yeah.
And very satisfying to do. And was that interview, is hers still extant? Doing
No,
anything?
but I think like any like good grassroots project, it's sort of like foment. Like Vanessa ended up running for village trustee out of that, and I ended up taking on president position at CultureConnect. Like I feel like it was, it served its purpose, and it was a little bit of a breeding ground for like what kind of civic engagement do we want to do in systems that might already exist.
Right. And CultureConnect, tell us a little bit about CultureConnect.
Yeah. Just like, you want me to pretend like you don't know what CultureConnect is?
Yeah,
your listeners don't. Your listeners
maybe
don't.
they
Yes.
don't. Yeah.
Okay. Norm's going to quiz me on what our mission statement is.
Oh, yeah.
He has it printed out.
What's the mission? I had to print it out because I don't know. Yeah, what is the mission statement of CultureConnect?
We serve the youth and families of our many communities to create a future.
Many communities.
To create a future of social justice and global engagement and cultural competence.
Wow.
Pretty good?
Super good.
Great. Was it many communities, or did we ditch the many communities?
We ditched the many.
Norm wanted the many.
I wanted the many. Nobody else did.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to tease you.
Helps empower.
Empower, yes.
Was there to serve. It's an amazing organization. Your leadership is spectacular. Also, Ron, who was the previous president, just
Truly
amazing. I can't even believe I'm a part of this group and that you all still have me. But so tell us something sort of non-mission statement about what's going on with CultureConnect.
Well, I mean, CultureConnect, I'd say like we have a lot of different programs, so it's often difficult for people to be like, oh, you do that and you do that. But we've sort of let the board members take that mission and then say what kinds of projects they would feel passionate about doing that are based in that mission. So that's created, for instance, a lovely local artist, Norm Magnusson, does some arts programming through us, and like does a Veterans Day arts crawl. I don't know if you've heard about it.
I do. I have heard about it.
And we also do an after-school program for kids where English is not the primary language spoken at home, and so doing homework help for them. We do a trip to Madagascar that's kind of a deep dive into really understanding not just the culture of Madagascar, but kind of the global impact on Madagascar. So really understanding our role as a country and how Western, involvement has impacted Madagascar and continues to. So it's, we do a bunch of different.
Is there anything coming up, say next weekend?
That's interesting. This is a really interesting question. We're doing our first ever multicultural food festival
Oh,
on Sunday, May 22nd, from 1 to 4 at Black Snake Brewery. Brewery.
Old Adrian's Farm.
Old Adrian. It has
there,
so many names.
9G.
Yep. Out in Statsburg. So look it up. Check out our website.
Oh, what's the URL?
The URL is www.
Oh, thanks.
.CultureConnect RBK for Rhinebeck.org.
Yeah.
And you can get
cultureconnect.rbk.org. And you get, it just sounds amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds like a spectacular event. There's going to be food from all these different cultures.
Yes.
There's going to be African drumming and a salsa band,
Yep.
African dancing.
All that stuff.
Yeah. It's hopefully the weather will be nice because it's going to be a fabulous event and the first annual.
Yes.
And I keep thinking about this, like, if this goes and it's every year,
Yeah.
it's going to be a great thing for Rhinebeck.
Yes, it would.
To host that.
It's
as
true.
well as for Culture Connect.
Yeah, I have not been able to have that 35,000 foot view just yet, but yes, you are right. I'm deep down in the weeds of it at this point.
Yeah, and the weeds of other things too, right? You work with Rhinebeck Responds.
I did. I was on the steering committee for Rhinebeck Responds. Rhinebeck Responds has recently ended its run
Oh,
officially.
oh.
Yeah.
And how come? Why was it formed?
That was formed. That was the wonderful and late Lisa Redeker, who was a dedicated volunteer at Culture Connect in our College Connect program for first generation college students. Lisa's husband, Mark, first was looking for some way to kind of get involved and help our community during the beginning of the pandemic and just trying to figure out, like, what needs are not getting met, what's not happening here, where are people struggling, where are businesses struggling. And so he ended up just kind of pulling together, I guess he wouldn't say that he was the one who first pulled it together, but he ended up becoming our fearless leader and pulled together a group of people and just started kind of polling them on, like, what is needed, what's not happening, where's the big government or other nonprofits not stepping in where people are suffering.
Right. And what were some of the things that you all did during the, 2 years of your...
Yeah, I was only there for, I guess, about a year and a half, because then when I became the president of Culture Connect, I said, I think I might have my fingers in too many pots. I need to step away.
Smart.
Yes, it was necessary. Basically, Rhinebeck Responds ended up kind of looking at 2 different areas. I was really in charge of the individuals and families, is what it was called.
Right.
And so that, for me, was looking at who were the people who were not getting government assistance, essentially. So really looking at some of the families we serve with Culture Connect who are undocumented, so often work off the books, therefore couldn't be getting unemployment, and potentially were nervous about going to official organizations and trying to get that. So I worked over there in that, like, leading that arm, created a committee to work on that. And then there was a whole other group that was trying to help the small businesses in town because, as we all know, they suffered significantly, restaurants and small businesses, when everybody was too scared to go.
Right. It was a tough time. And Rhinebeck Response, like, just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Started doing great stuff. Culture Connect, of course, was already there and did a whole bunch of good stuff.
Yep.
And the school district did a bunch of great stuff.
Yeah. And there was great coordination between everybody, too, which was lovely.
Yeah, it was really, really lovely. And one of the things I really like about Rhinebeck is the communities, the many communities
Yes.
here that everybody seems to be a member of a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Well, it is, as you mentioned, hot here in
Oh.
the Nook at the Epicurean. So maybe now is a good time to break. And as is the tradition here in this show, to have a cocktail. What'd you bring?
I brought a paper plane.
Oh.
Have you had a paper plane before?
No.
Oh, Matt has had a paper plane before.
Well, I'm saying
he's
no.
a worldly man.
Well.
And I brought you a nice glass. The dishwasher was running, so I have a mug. You have an actual nice glass.
Oh, thank you so much. That is a nice glass. And it's cold,
I'll let
too.
you. Oh no, that's okay. I'm happy.
It's in here. It's all mixed up.
Yeah, all mixed up.
All right.
Oh, good. Okay, mason jar in my.
With the lead too. Here, let me pour it in your.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful
This is
mug first.
a mason jar in honor of my hippie upbringing, which I know Norm is
Matt, would
trying
you
to get to.
like
next.
some? Yeah. All right. Well, perfect. Let's hear about your hippie upbringing. Where you're not from Texas, is that?
Oh, I'm
correct?
not from Texas.
Where are
No,
you
no.
from?
I grew up in central rural Virginia,
Oh,
Louisa County, to be exact.
wow, Louisa County. Mm-hmm. And what was that like? It was rural. Were your folks farmers or educators?
They were sort of farmers. I mean, just casual. They farmed in a way that took up an enormous amount of time but generated no income.
Oh, it sounds like my work.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's a sort of art, farming in that way.
Yeah.
So my dad's side of the family is like 6 generations in Virginia. So
Wow. Mm-hmm. And are they still there?
my parents are still there.
And
My
what's the name?
grandparents.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
What's the name of the town?
It's Louisa.
Louisa. Oh, I don't know why I didn't get that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know why he didn't get that
Somebody
on
thought that was the county. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
sure. I mean, we got Dutchess County and we live in Rhinebeck, but in Louisa County, there's one town.
So good. Well,
it's
and how
Louisa.
big is it? And cheers. This drink is
Cheers.
delicious.
Oh,
Thank you.
good. I'm so glad you like it.
How big is the town of Louisa?
I don't know the answer to that, but small, very small. I mean, it was a Rhinebecky sort of, but I mean, not in any way. It's like was a very mixed. Like I'd say racially, it was probably about 50% black and 50% white. When I was growing up there in the 80s, there was not really many other ethnicities
No other
represented.
ethnicities. So,
No.
so lots of Christian churches.
Lots of churches.
And you mentioned on Instagram, I told you this, like I had to go to Instagram to get some details of your life, that you grew up in a Zionist household
I did, yeah.
in Louisa.
In Louisa. We were the only Jews.
Thanks. There's
Yep.
the follow-up question. Was there a temple, a synagogue nearby?
We were about 30 minutes from Charlottesville, and so and about an hour from Richmond, and so there are synagogues in both places. But we didn't practice anything religious when I was little. Then when I was around 8 years old, my sister was 6, my brother was 3. My parents were feeling bad for not having done any sort of religious education and moved us to Israel for a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
And then, so when you were 8? Or?
when I was 8.
So 8, so it would have been another few years later. Did you have a bat mitzvah?
I did end up having a bat mitzvah. It's true.
Back
Yes.
in Louisa?
Yes, back in. Yes, it took place in
Charlottesville.
Charlottesville. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Well, congratulations. I'm sure you kicked ass.
Thank you. Yes, I had a little black velvet pillbox hat.
You do.
I should have brought pictures of my bat mitzvah.
Yeah, you really should. That'd be great. Wow. And so I wanted to ask, because this post that you had on Instagram, it was a picture of a guy holding up a sign that says, "I am Jewish and I want Israel to stop killing Palestinians."
Yeah.
And you said in the text on there that growing up in a Zionist household, it took you a while to sort of come around and see things through a different lens.
Yeah.
What was that process like?
Yeah. So when we lived in Israel when I was little, I think I had some sense of the tension, let's just say, but from a very Israeli perspective. But I was a
Yeah.
kid. That was not kind of my main focus. I wasn't paying that much attention to that.
No, but nationalism seems sort of easy to seep into young hearts and
Yes,
minds.
certainly. But I'd say my whole family was very pro-Israel because that's so conflated with being Jewish,
Yeah.
a Jewish American too. So it's
Right.
they seem to me inextricably linked. I didn't know there was another way to be Jewish in America without being Zionist. That's the only people that I knew. When I was 15, my parents did not have a very easy relationship with them, put it lightly, and they gave me the choice of either going to military school, Fork Union Military Academy down the road, or to go to Israel for another year
Wow.
on a program alone. I mean, not with them, obviously. So there was a program.
Choosing Israel.
I chose Israel. And I mean, that was a pretty awesome experience. It was like, 15 or 20 American students from all over the U.S. Most of them had not been kicked out. And that same way, they were mostly just Zionists. They were mostly kids who had just been raised Zionist. And it was like a really wonderful, exciting thing to get to go live in Israel for a year. We lived on our own in dorms. I mean, we were wild. We were
Sure.
making out with Israeli soldiers, hitchhiking down the road, drinking vodka. It was, it was not Fork Union Military Academy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got pretty radicalized, I would say, there, and not because the program was so radical, but just because when you're a Jew and you arrive in Israel, they basically say, welcome home.
Right. And that's nice.
Yeah.
There's
it feels amazing.
Homeland.
Yeah.
So when you say radicalized, you mean really pro Israel and anti everything that's potentially against Israel.
Yes. So I came
perceived to be.
Perceived to be. Yes. I mean, I felt under attack in Israel. I mean, we were made to feel very scared of Palestine, of Palestinians, afraid of, bus bombings and, like under attack. That was the story. I didn't really hear another story while I was there.
Right.
And I came home and was like all ready to, I was a senior when I came back. I was 16 years old. I skipped a grade. We can go back to that later. So I was 16 years old. I was going into my senior year at a pretty awesome private school in Charlottesville that was just like a really special place.
Were you boarding there?
Not boarding. I moved back home.
Okay. And were things with your folks any better after that year?
They were better in the sense that I got time and perspective to be able to say, they're crazy.
Oh.
And if I want to go graduate from this school that I wanted to go graduate from with my friends, then I need to make nice for a year and then get the F out.
And you did.
And I did.
Well, hats off to you.
Thank you.
It's a tough time for kids with their parents, and I think especially for young girls with their parents, 15, 16.
Yeah. It was always tough with them.
And then you graduated there and you left home.
I did. I graduated, and I'll just go back quickly to just say what happened was I came back saying I was ready to join the Israeli army, that I was going to finish high school, and that I was going to go to Israel, my homeland, and join the army because that's what you do. If I went home to Israel, then I would join the army. And my lifelong best friend, who I'd known, we're born a week apart, so she's known me since I was born. She was in my class, in my senior class. And she and another new friend who was in my class were both like, hoo, we need to unindoctrinate you. And so they requested, because it was just this cute hippie little school, a ethics class, individual study ethics class with our headmaster, in which we unentangled my Zionism.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds, the way you put it sounds like sort of like an intervention or
it was an
deprogramming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was a class, an actual class that was offered there, or they were just specially...
We made up an ethics, individual study, but group study class.
And so at some point, you saw things differently. Well, were there, a couple of particular things that you heard? You're like, oh, that makes sense. And the thing I was thinking, was taught to think, does not make sense.
Yeah. I think as I remember at the time, it was what's the right words, but just, it didn't make any sense to not apply the same human rights to Palestinian people as to the people of Israel and all the other people. I mean, I've always, for whatever reason, been sort of like on the side of the marginalized, the oppressed. And as a Jew, you get taught that that's who you are. We are the oppressed people. Oppressed. Yes. And so to recognize...
Persecuted.
Yes. To recognize the like utter... I don't know why I can't grab the word, but just it makes absolutely no sense to say we are the most oppressed people and to be oppressing and being violent towards and margin. I mean, it's, there's not enough words in the book to say about what Israel, the state of Israel, is doing to Palestinians. So uncovering that and understanding that that was the state that people were living in and how, just how the violence that I was seeing as what I felt like a temporary Israeli, how that was bred out of desperation.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's super heavy.
Yeah, it was.
So I just want to ask this. You work now as a therapist.
I do.
A shrink, as they say. And that time of your life sounds so psychologically interesting. Do you think that was one of the main reasons you wanted to become a therapist?
That's an interesting question.
Yay.
Was that the first time? Do you wait for a little bell to ring for when somebody says,
Well,
"Oh, that's an interesting question"?
If I ask an interesting question.
I think for me that really came when I went to college. I went to Oberlin College, and I volunteered at a rape crisis center. I don't know if they really call them rape crisis centers anymore, but and I volunteered, did a training there, and I volunteered to help counsel there, and so I got to like do sort of informal counseling. It was like back when people could do that in a more grassroots way, like just do a 40-hour training at a rape crisis center. I was 20 years old, and then I was counseling people. But you got to start somewhere. And I was like, I'm good at this. I like it, and I'm really good at it.
And what do you think makes you good at it?
I think I'm genuinely interested. Genuine compassion for people, but also just genuinely interested in hearing what they want to tell me about what's happening for them.
Right.
And just a true desire for them, for me, to feel better, happier, live a more full life.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's wonderful. So when I'm going to use this word again, when you matriculated
When I matriculated.
at Oberlin, what did you think you were going to study?
I don't know that I was thinking about that. I went to Brandeis for a year because while I had not yet been deprogrammed, I applied to a lot of Jewish schools. So then I was deprogrammed, but I was accepted into a lot
after applying and before matriculating.
Yeah, matriculating. It's going to be the word of the hour.
It is.
I've matriculated so many times.
TMI.
Sorry, Norm. So I went to Brandeis for a year.
Wow.
And that was pretty miserable. It was not a good fit.
Okay.
And then I took a year off and traveled around the country and lived in this New York City for a bit of it with one of the friends who deprogrammed me. And then during that time, I applied to Oberlin because I visited as I was on the road driving around the country.
Have you ever been involved in deprogramming anybody from anything?
It's tricky, right? Isn't therapy there's a little bit of that in all of it, but no, not officially.
A little bit of it, in as much as like talking people off of this ledge or
talking people into new ways of seeing things, right? Out of habitual associations and patterns and into new ones.
Yeah, new ways of seeing things. And there's a huge portion of the U.S. population that is really threatened by seeing things in a new way.
Yes.
And it's fascinating to me. I see it, I understand maybe, you're going to lose your comfort for starters, your power, but at the same time, I'm like, well, it's growth. It's interesting. You're learning stuff. Why do you think people are so threatened by that?
That's such a good question.
I'm going to drink again.
Oh my God, this is the drinking game. Compliment Norm,
Yeah,
and then he has to drink.
It's like Hi Bob. While you were thinking, we used to play this drinking game in college called Hi Bob. We'd watch the Bob Newhart show, and every time somebody said Bob, you'd take a shot of beer. Every time they said Hi Bob, you'd take 2 shots. And you'd
Dangerous.
Just be ripped just on beer at the end of a 22-minute show.
That was where you matriculated.
Yeah.
Why do I think that people are so resistant to growth or new information? Is that kind of the question?
And new ways of looking at things.
I think, I often think a lot of things come back to shame, that we all like to avoid shame. And if you start to look at something a new way, you might have to look back and say, I guess I might have hurt somebody. I might have done something wrong.
Right. And
then you have to reckon with that. And I think there's a lot of people that, I think it's mostly unconscious, people's avoidance of that. I don't think that they're thinking, if I accepted this new way, then I would have to go back and apologize maybe or reckon or feel shame with that. But I think it's just a sort of gut reaction. No, better to stay over here doing things the way I've always done them. Then I can
not have to deal with unpleasant emotions and
yes,
stuff like that.
yeah,
Which motivates a lot of people to
Yeah.
a lot of bad places.
sure does.
So what do you like best about being a shrink?
What do I like best about it? I mean, I'd say one of my favorite things is when people come to me and they've never gone to therapy before.
Uh-huh.
I love that. Because I think I'm good at what I do, and if it's a good fit, then I feel like I can really introduce somebody, not only whatever we do together, but just to the idea that therapy can be meaningful and useful, and then that can kind of have this ripple effect potentially in their life, but also in the lives of other people that they know, where they're talking up the biz
Right.
to other people. Like, yeah, this really does work. It's not just saying, my mom was so shitty. Am I allowed to say shitty on radio free rhyme?
And so speaking of shitty moms, at one point you turned away from what your parents felt.
Yeah.
And how did they take that?
Ooh, not well. We had a lot of fights about Israel-Palestine for sure. Yeah.
Particularly Israel-Palestine. I mean, that's really everything over there, right?
Yeah, I mean, we fought about everything. My parents and I have always really struggled to see things in the same way, but that's just one that I can remember me really trying to say, like, this doesn't make any sense, right? Like,
but
right?
they were entrenched in these old ways.
Entrenched.
So how did that work itself out?
I think we ended up not talking about, at some point, like just stopping talking about that. There was no point anymore to kind of trying to convince. And to be fair, I mean, my mom's parents survived the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So it's again, that does not need to be a...
People go different ways with that.
People go different ways with
They
that.
like sort of like dig in, like,
Yep.
fuck that.
Yep.
Or they like dig out.
Yeah.
They say, why can't we all just get along? And the grandparents dug in, I'm guessing.
My grandparents, what would they... yeah, they were probably pretty Zionist. I don't totally... My grandfather died right in my first year of college.
Both sets of grandparents?
No, I've got my sixth generation Virginia.
Oh.
Definitely were not involved in the Holocaust. And then I've got my Polish Holocaust surviving grandparents.
Right.
Yeah. And my Virginia grandparents, not really Zionist. My grandmother was quite a character. Fanny Rosenthal.
Fanny Rosenthal.
And she was just sort of, she was culturally Jewish. She had to be part of the synagogue. It was just the thing that you do. Did she really care about Israel at all? I don't know.
So I'm just, you keep saying that, like Fanny Rosenthal. I imagine Fanny Rosenthal and Louisa or thereabouts.
Richmond.
But still, people being like, oh, yeah, this is the Jewish family down the road. And they're just being one. That must have been kind of something to reckon with as a young kid.
Yeah. I mean, because for the beginning part, for the first almost 10 years of my life, we were not really practicing much Judaism.
Right.
It was more that people were disturbed by my hair, when I went to the public school. So I went to a couple of, I matriculated many times. It's really true.
Best hair in town.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Easy to find me even when I'm wearing a mask. That was
Yeah,
a pandemic,
yeah.
real pandemic problem. Everybody else got to be anonymous, and people would be like, oh, there's her poofy head walking by.
Yeah.
So I went to, there was a commune. It's still one of the only still remaining communes in the U.S. that's been around for decades and decades, called
Wow.
Twin Oaks. It was in Louisa, Virginia.
Wow.
And so I went to their school for part of my childhood, and then I went to the local elementary school. So their school was, unsurprisingly, quite radical and very white, still very white, but radical in terms of queer politics and all kinds of things. When I went to the public school, people were like, what are you? Why do you have this curly hair? Are you mixed? meaning like, are you
right.
biracial, black and white?
Right.
And I'd be like, I really am not. And people were like,
You are.
You are.
Yeah. You're in deep denial
there
in the
is
deep south.
no way you have that hair and are just a white person. And I was like, well, I'm Jewish, but there was nobody had any context for that.
What a rich youth. I can't even imagine, what it'd be like to have people curious and saying, what are you? And then telling you, no, you're wrong. You're actually this, not the thing that you say there that you are. And right in there is something, I say I can't even imagine. But I do imagine. I feel like, imagining is part of empathy, and empathy is essentially a creative act, imagining what somebody else might be feeling. And if you have a good creative mind, then hopefully you could have more empathy. But do you think that, like, take me, straight white guy in America, can ever truly imagine what it's like for other people, like, say, a queer black woman in Texas who just is losing all these rights, or Florida? Do you think, are there limits to empathy? Are there natural psychological limits to empathy? Do I get to drink again?
You do get to drink again. And we really should. I was like, should I pull some stuff up from Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart? I feel like
Brene Brown.
This is like, that's who we should consult about this question, obviously. It's a good one.
Yeah. She's spectacular.
She really is. Her most recent book is quite lovely. I don't know if you've read it or listened to it.
I have not.
It's a little different than some of her other ones, and the things she's been saying for years needs to just keep being said, and I need to keep hearing it. But this book is all about defining emotions and really helping to kind of like synthesize like what's in empathy, what is compassion.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Defining what's in these emotions. What are the component elements?
Yeah.
And I guess the idea is then you can inhabit them more clearly.
Yeah, and you can know what you're missing, right? Like if I'm deep in this one, then what am I not experiencing?
Which is another question, but I'm going to come back to the limits empathy question. She's defining what's in these emotions, and in so doing, she's bringing this intellectual and verbal, written definition to an emotional thing.
Yeah.
Is it possible to do that completely?
I don't think so. I mean, that my website does not speak much about somatic experiencing. Did I?
No.
Okay, I need to update it. But so I did pre-pandemic. I did a 3-year training in somatic experiencing therapy. So I am a somatic experiencing practitioner.
What is that?
So that is bringing the body into therapy.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of research over the past so many years about just like what the limitations are of intellectually talking about these concepts, right? How many times can you go back over this, here was my, traumatic relationship with my parents, or this thing that happened, and how many times can you say this thing isn't working? But, let's look at it all these different ways. And so somatic experiencing is really focusing on your nervous system and your felt sense and experience, the ways that our bodies store up these experiences on a nervous system level.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
Previous
I can never
guest,
tell how wonky that is,
Previous guest here was talking about intergenerational traumas and internalized trauma and stuff like that. So it seems similar.
Yes. Yeah, there's some of that. So I think what I have found in working with people over many years and doing a lot of trauma work, because there's almost always some trauma element in people's stories, whether it's in somatic experiencing, I'll say big T trauma or little t trauma, doesn't matter how it goes into your body, right? Like if your body goes into into kind of lizard brain, if your body goes into a fight, flight, threat response, whether it's a small T trauma or a big T, it's, it still happens.
How do you tell?
How do you tell that your body goes into that space?
Big T or small T?
Oh, no. Well, that doesn't really matter. I just say that to say people will be like, well, I haven't had a trauma, but like you might have had small T traumas where you go into that mental space. Body
Also, I'm going to guess quite often people don't recall these traumas that have affected them and will continue to affect them.
Yes.
And they never can name it.
Yep.
or put a finger on it, be like, oh, like,
Yes.
you know, like if you watch old Hitchcock films,
Right.
you know, they always have that moment, the cathartic moment. It's like, oh, that happened.
Yes.
And now I'm better.
Yeah.
People don't have that. It doesn't work that way. So how do you forge beyond that when people are
That's
like,
a great
what do you mean?
question.
Drinking
got a
again.
drink.
Yeah.
I need to come up with a new adjective too. I think I've done great and excellent, and
Yeah.
then maybe great. So I need to do it. I'll do like my Archer's one from like 5th grade. Awesome.
Awesome.
Which he used to spell OWSOM. That was an awesome question. So that one of the things I love about somatic experiencing therapy is that you don't have to get so much into the why. Like, why is this happening inside of me? Right? But you can just go into the what is happening and how can I have a different experience, right? So how can I notice, like, whoo, I start getting real panicky. I don't know why. I don't know what happened. Maybe somebody came in the store behind me and there's just something about that agitates my system, right? It makes me feel not safe. And what I start to learn is what, right? To notice, oh, that thing is happening. And when that happens, I lose access to most of my brain and my experience. I start just being a little panicky. And what can I do when that happens?
Okay. So these things, somebody walks in the store behind you, and that's a trigger for you,
Right.
say.
Yep.
What are the things that you do to deal with the triggers? First, let me say, what are the triggers in your life?
Oh, the triggers in my life.
Just a few. We only have 10 minutes left. Yeah.
What are the triggers in my life? Being misunderstood.
What?
Being misunderstood.
I don't get it. Sorry.
Damn it, Norm. I started sweating as soon as you said that. That's a big one for me. I don't like it. It's one of the reasons I like, God bless Vanessa for being in public service. Like, having to deal with people regularly misunderstanding what you're trying to do, and then trying to, I don't know, whatever you do with that, explain it to them or just move past it. Woo, that gets me.
Do you know why that became a trigger for you?
Yes.
Oh.
It's my childhood, Norm.
Oh, your mother.
It's my mother, my father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this argument about Palestine and Israel, and that they never quite understood you.
Yeah.
And so that's become a trigger.
Oh, so now he's trying to therapize me in here. He wouldn't let me do a therapy session. Listeners,
Get your own
listeners,
show.
note this. I suggested to Norm that I do a little therapy session where he was the client, and now
All right.
he's trying
All
to
right.
make me.
Come on, bring it. Give me 2 minutes of
What?
Yeah, come on, therapize.
Oh, you want me to
In
therapize
fact,
you?
you know what? I
Okay.
actually have somebody wrote in a question.
Oh.
Here, let me see if I can
Somebody.
find it. I don't usually take questions from the audience, but today a few different people wrote in with the same question when they saw you were going to be in the show. Here it is. As a professional therapist with years of experience, could you please shed some light on this? What the fuck's the matter with Norm?
Wow.
I
A
know.
couple of people wrote that in. Three or four people.
Yeah, they used all the
It
same,
was
all in
N,
the same
N
language.
period M,
Yeah,
N period Magnusson,
yeah.
Norm period
Different
M.
things.
Okay, Norm.
Oh,
Well, so right now, take a moment. And you don't need to change anything. Don't need to change anything about what you're doing or how you're sitting, how you're breathing.
okay.
Just take a moment to go in and just notice what's happening inside, what you're feeling. Doesn't have to be an emotion. It can be a physical sensation.
Okay.
Are you aware of something?
Yeah.
Okay. What are you aware of?
I'm really happy.
Yeah. And how do
Yeah.
you feel that in your body? Like, what happens inside your body when you say, I feel really happy? What do you notice happening inside?
Well, absence of negatives
Okay.
inside my physical being.
Yeah. And so just hang out with that for a little bit longer, just exploring what, like, the absence of negatives, what's there in the absence. You can notice temperature. I mean, I know it's warm in here, but inside, just noticing, is there movement? Is there temperature? Is there any sort of sensation in any?
Yeah, I guess I feel sort of a movement, like circulation of stuff. I mean, the image that came to mind was like a refrigerator, sort
Right.
of like circulating cool water
Love that.
through, coils.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love an image. That's one of my favorite
Yeah.
things around somatic. So just noticing that image of the refrigerator circulating that cool energy through.
So good. Noticing.
And just,
happy.
yeah, and just letting yourself just enjoy that and see how that resonates through your whole body. Just checking and seeing, like, how is that in your arms? How is that in your legs? How does your whole system take in happy?
I don't know. It's hard to say because when you mentioned legs, all of
Yeah.
a sudden I tune into my legs. I'm like, oh, there are the legs. And I feel the weight of
Yeah.
the legs. And is that because I wasn't tuned into them before or because this thought adds weight to my legs?
Yeah. Hard to know. You don't need to think about why. You're just
Okay.
noticing
All right,
right
good.
now. You're just
I'm noticing.
observing it. Nothing needs to be any different than it is.
Okay.
So there's weight in your legs and there's the cool circulation in your body.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah. So that's just we can pause there. We can continue. You seem to be really enjoying this therapy session.
This
but
is nice. It doesn't make the best radio.
Yes.
The moments of my
Yeah, it's true.
blissful silence.
But what you do with that is you know more about what it feels like inside of you and the image that's associated with that when you feel happy and relaxed,
Okay.
right? So if you need to call happy and relaxed, you have more of a full body sense, not an intellectual sense. I wish I was more happy and relaxed right now,
Yeah.
but more of a full body sense of what it is that you're hoping to feel. So that's one of the ways you can use somatic experiencing is like, I could suggest to you, like, Norm, if you're in one of those moments where you're feeling panicky, somebody walked in behind you and you notice, like, whatever it is that happens that's a little panicky,
Right.
you can invite the image of that refrigerator
Yeah.
and you will experience some of that.
Interesting. Now, I'll tell you this in the interest of talking to a shrink here. The image of the refrigerator was refined to when I was a kid, I used to get lots of sort of upper respiratory problems. I had pneumonia and bronchitis and all that stuff. And one time I had pneumonia. I had a super high temperature. Went to the hospital and they put me on a cold bed. And it was,
Wow.
just a ring of tubes through which they pumped ice water.
Yeah.
Because when your temperature gets too high, it's super dangerous. And so they put me on this bed to like bring the temperature down. So the refrigerator
Yeah.
idea was replaced by that, which was most definitely not a happy time.
No, but there was relief and caretaking in that experience, right? I mean, it was
Yeah.
like there had been fear and heat and
Well, yeah, I'm with you for all that,
Mm-hmm.
but I will counter. Could it be, because at the time I was like 13 or 14, I'm
Yeah.
like, that's a cool machine.
Right.
That's so cool the way that works.
Yep.
Could it not be the caretaking and the concern and just that's a cool machine?
it could be, but it sounds like the feeling that it was associated with was happy.
Yeah.
So who knows? But we
Yeah.
don't need to know why. That's what came up for you right then, and it was an enjoyable experience, right? I mean, like just right now when you were like, I feel good, and that's what I see. And
So of the patients you're dealing with, how many of them know why? With how many of them do you end up knowing why, and how many just like, well, we don't need to know?
yeah, plenty know why, and a lot of times I just will, in a way that is not the same as talk therapy, which I did for many years and which most people do, I'll interrupt. Like, I don't want to go back deep in the story because, as you probably know, on a felt sense from like stories that are still upsetting, you relive a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to redo because it's just cementing in those neural pathways, right? That this experience is associated with pain and with trauma and et cetera. So I don't want people retelling the story in a same way that they've done 100 times.
Interesting. And what about like neural reprogramming, sort of like writing it down from like 100 different
Yeah.
angles? To,
Yeah. I think those are super interesting. I'm not trained in any of that, but I've read about that. There was a UT professor, I think, who was really big in the rewriting. And I mean, in some ways, I'm doing some sort of memory reconsolidation in some ways. Like I'm trying to bring in some sense of resource and calm, even as you're recalling a traumatic memory. So it's a
help change the way people are relating to it.
yeah. And the way they relate to future things that they don't even necessarily know are associated. Sometimes you're just like, I got bit by a dog in front of a blue house, and now I like get panicky every time I see a blue house, right? But
Right.
sometimes you're like, I don't know, I get panicky. Like I'm having trouble sleeping. I don't know what to tell you about it. And I'm like, that's fine.
Yeah.
We don't need to know, but we can explore the feeling and we can start to work that differently.
Oh, love it. Thank you for doing that work. I got a divorce
being
like
game.
11, 12 years ago, and it was a really difficult time in my life.
Yeah.
And my shrink just pulled me through it.
Yeah.
She was so amazing. So thanks for doing that work. So you mentioned UT. Is that where you studied?
I did do my social work degree. I got my master's at
MSW.
University of Texas in Austin.
In Austin.
I'm a Longhorn.
Had you been to? Did you go from Oberlin to there? From Brandeis to Oberlin?
Yeah, so Brandeis to driving around the country to living in New York City for a little bit to Oberlin, and then Oberlin to New Orleans.
Oh, wow! What'd you
Yeah.
do down there?
What did I do?
Yeah.
Well, like anybody who spent
How old were
whose
you?
grandparents spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on their education, I became a back waiter.
Oh,
As in, I bussed tables at a fancy restaurant.
What was it
in New
called?
Orleans? Cobalt. It was a Susan Spicer restaurant. Do you know her?
no.
She's a famous, female chef in New Orleans. Had a bunch of restaurants. Then I worked at a little health food store. I just did utter bullshit.
So the grandparents must have been thrilled.
Oh, they were
that
so
their money
proud.
was going to that. In New Orleans, where you were, how much? 23?
Yeah, probably something like that. 22. Yeah.
So doing all the New Orleans things that 22, 23-year-olds do.
I was not really my speed. I moved there honestly because you'll appreciate this little story. But I didn't know where I wanted to go after Oberlin. But it's so gray there. I know you grew up in the Midwest. You grew up in Ohio.
Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So gray. Maybe not as gray in Cincinnati as it is up in the northerns.
Cincinnati's pretty gray.
Okay.
It's down in the Ohio Valley. It has this thing called an atmospheric inversion, so the clouds don't usually just push beyond the Ohio
Wow.
Valley. Yeah, when I think about Cincinnati summers, it's like light gray.
Wow.
Like, where's the blue?
It was so gray. So in Oberlin, there was a morning I woke up and I was like, I'm late for class. And I was like, no, that's just sun. And I haven't seen it
In months.
in so long. So I basically, and it was also Oberlin, as you probably know, just like very progressive, as we called it at the time, very politically correct. Like it was great for me. It's totally in my heart, and I was sick of it. So I moved to the sunniest, least politically correct area that I could think of,
New Orleans.
New Orleans.
And where'd you live there?
I lived in the Garden District, just a couple blocks off St. Charles.
Fancy.
Right by the Turning Point Lounge.
And I don't know the Turning Point Lounge.
No, I mean, it just was great because it was like, you've got St. Charles where the parade route.
Yeah.
And then like 2 blocks off, it's just suddenly like city housing, like projects. And the Turning Point Lounge, I lived on the block 2 blocks up at the Turning Point Lounge, which was the turning point from like, this is sort of parade area to like, no, that's not
Right.
the parade anymore.
Even coming from Virginia by Ohio,
Yeah.
and New York and stuff,
Yeah.
must have been a little bit of culture shock.
I mean, I'm a pretty good shapeshifter and a pretty good southerner. So it's like, all that stuff that you do, you just like, you say hey to your neighbors and Miss Audrey and, friends with Chris, who's like the crack addict who like lives on your block. Like it's like a very southern, a very familiar in a southern way to just be like, yeah, of course. I think it would have been harder to be like a true blue northerner and move down and have people expecting you to really interact.
Right.
And then be like,
And
I don't
not-
want to be friends
not
with my
be
neighbor.
aghast
Yeah.
at so much of the stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thanks for shape shifting into this seat here. We are out of time.
We're done?
We're done.
That
We
was
got
so fun,
6
Norm.
seconds left. Amazing. So much fun. And, I just think you're the best. And the bomb.
Thanks.
And thanks for all
Likewise.
you do for your private clients and for the communities that you're in.
Thank you, Norm.
Thanks for coming here and talking with me. Everybody else, have a great Friday evening. Thanks for tuning in to radiofreerhinecliff.org. Good night.
Bye.